18 years ago, my dad cut me off, telling me, "Roger, you don't deserve our last name." He handed everything to my sister instead. Just last week at dinner, he said, "Your sister destroyed the business. We need you now." I smiled, knowing the merger documents were already sitting in my briefcase. By tomorrow, they'll find out who just bought their company. You know that searing pain when someone you trust completely betrays you? The kind that makes your blood run cold? Well, imagine that, but from your own father, who then spent years actively trying to destroy your life. 18 years later, I sat across from him, watching his hands tremble as he reached for water, completely unaware that he was begging me, the son he'd disowned, to save the very empire I was about to personally acquire. It was at Romano's Steakhouse, a place filled with so many memories. 18 years. That's how long it had been since Frank Fletcher looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worthy. Not worthy of carrying our family name. Not worthy of the business my own grandfather built. He'd practically handed everything to my sister, Sarah, on a silver platter, while I walked away with nothing but bruised pride and a fire in my gut that refused to be extinguished. And now, here he was, a once proud, booming man, reduced to a whisper, asking a complete stranger for help, desperate to save Fletcher Construction from utter collapse. The irony? Oh, it was utterly, perfectly exquisite. My leather briefcase, sitting innocently by my chair, held the merger documents. Tomorrow morning, the world would learn exactly who had just acquired his entire operation, right under his nose, through my shell company. That summer day, 18 years ago. God, it still burns like acid in my chest. I was 22, fresh out of state university, business degree in hand, practically vibrating with excitement. I was ready to join the family company, the one Grandpa Joe had literally built from nothing back in the day. A handshake, a pickup truck, and an unshakable belief that honest work always pays off. That was Grandpa Joe. And me? I'd spent every summer since I was 12 learning the ropes, pouring concrete, running electrical, reading blueprints. By graduation, I swear I could frame a house faster than guys with 20 years experience. I knew I was ready to step into that legacy. But Frank, Dad, he had other plans entirely. The bombshell dropped during our annual 4th of July barbecue. 3 generations of Fletchers, all gathered, key foremen, longtime clients, half the neighborhood. The air smelled of grilled burgers, my mom's apple pie cooling on the picnic table. Red, white, and blue bunting strung from the old oak trees Grandpa Joe himself had planted. Dad stood up on the deck, tapping his beer bottle with a fork. That authoritative tone, the one he used on job sites when he needed everyone to snap to attention, boomed across the yard. "I want to make an announcement about the future of Fletcher Construction," he declared, chest puffed out. "This company's been in our family for 3 generations. It's time to plan for the 4th. My heart was pounding. This was it. The moment I'd worked for my whole life. Then he dropped the bomb. After careful consideration, he said, "I've decided that Sarah will be taking over operations as vice president, effective immediately. She's got the Fletcher instincts, the natural leadership, and most importantly, the backbone this business requires." The world went silent. I swear I could hear the cicadas buzzing in the humid evening heat, but everything else just stopped. Sarah, 19 years old, halfway through art history at some fancy liberal arts college. She'd never swung a hammer, never read a building code, never even stepped foot on a construction site unless Dad dragged her for a family photo op. But she had something I apparently lacked. She was confident, charismatic, completely at ease being the center of attention. Me? I was methodical, careful, always asking questions, double-checking specifications. Sarah made quick decisions and never looked back. Frank, it seemed, saw her decisiveness as strength. And my thoroughness? Apparently, that was a weakness. Then his eyes found mine in the crowd. "Roger," he continued, "you're a good kid, but you're too soft for this business. You overthink everything. Construction needs quick decisions, the ability to command respect from rough men. You've got book smarts, sure, but that's not what builds buildings." The humiliation. Oh God, the humiliation. It felt like a physical punch to the gut. 37 pairs of eyes were burning into me, watching my entire future crumble in real time. My Uncle Tommy shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Peterson next door suddenly found her potato salad utterly fascinating. Eddie Martinez, one of Grandpa Joe's oldest foremen, couldn't even meet my gaze. Sarah, though, she stepped forward, her blonde hair perfect despite the humidity. Her white sundress probably cost more than most of our crew made in a week. I'm honored to accept this responsibility, she said, her voice clear, confident, and with just a hint of condescension. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm excited about bringing fresh ideas to Fletcher Construction. We're going to take this company to the next level. The crowd applauded politely. Not once did she look at me during her little speech. Dad wrapped an arm around her, beaming with paternal pride. This girl's got vision. She's already talking about expanding into commercial development, even real estate investment. That's the kind of forward thinking this company needs. I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I intended. Dad, what about all the plans we discussed? The efficiency improvements, the new project management software, the employee training programs. His expression hardened. Roger, those are exactly the kinds of complications that slow down real progress. We've been doing things the same way for decades because they work. We don't need computers telling us how to pour concrete. But the industry is changing. I pressed, desperation creeping into my voice. If we don't adapt, we'll get left behind. The new environmental regulations alone require completely different approaches to material sourcing and waste management. See, Dad addressed the crowd, as if I wasn't even standing there. This is what I mean. Roger's always looking for problems instead of solutions. In construction, you've got to trust your gut and move fast. No time for endless analysis. Then he delivered the killing blow. The words that changed everything. Son, I love you, but you're just not worthy of the Fletcher name in this business. You don't have what it takes to lead men or build something lasting. Maybe you should consider a nice office job somewhere. Something that matches your temperament better. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. I looked around at the faces of people who had watched me grow up, who had taught me everything I knew about construction, who had praised my work ethic. Now they were all studying their shoes, or suddenly needing to refresh their drinks. Sarah finally broke the excruciating silence. Roger, she chirped, I hope you'll stay on and help me learn the ropes. I could really use your support as I transition into this role. That condescending sweetness, that was the final straw. She was offering me a chance to train my own replacement. To smile and nod while she took credit for everything our grandfather had built. I just set down my beer, turned, and walked toward the house. Mom caught my arm as I passed the kitchen window. Roger, honey, maybe you should think about this overnight. Your father's just trying to do what he thinks is best for the company. I kissed her cheek, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender perfume one last time. I love you, Mom. Take care of yourself. By sunrise the next morning, everything I owned was packed into my beat-up Ford pickup. I left my house key on the kitchen counter with a note, heading west, finding my own path. I didn't say goodbye to Frank or Sarah. I figured they were probably too busy planning their glorious future to even notice I was gone. As I drove through our neighborhood for the last time, I passed the job sites where Grandpa Joe had taught me that every foundation had to be perfect because everything else depended on it. That day, I made myself a promise. I would build something better than Fletcher Construction. Something that would make them realize exactly what they'd thrown away. 2 weeks later, the true depth of Frank's betrayal hit me. I was working for a small contractor in Phoenix, trying to establish myself. I called a potential client, someone who'd seemed really interested. The conversation went ice cold. Look, kid, the developer said, I got a call from Frank Fletcher back in your hometown. He told me you had some problems, reliability, anger management. Said you couldn't handle the pressure, and I should be careful trusting you with anything important. I hung up the phone, stared at the water stain on my studio apartment ceiling. It wasn't enough for Frank to reject me, to humiliate me. He was actively sabotaging my attempts to build a new life, anywhere within 500 miles of home. That night, something inside me hardened. If Frank wanted to destroy my reputation, fine. I'd build a new one. A reputation so impressive, so undeniable, that nobody would care what he had to say. I'd start from absolute zero, and I'd climb higher than he ever dreamed possible. And someday, somehow, I'd make sure he understood, with crystal clarity, exactly what he'd lost when he chose Sarah over the son who actually understood what it meant to be a Fletcher. 3 states away, in a town where nobody knew the Fletcher name, I started over. Just my work boots and a determination that burned hotter than the Arizona sun. Phoenix was booming in the early 2000s, subdivisions sprawling faster than anyone could build them. I rented a tiny studio, the kind of place where the pool was always broken and the AC barely worked. My neighbors were like me, trying to build something, though none of them were running from family betrayal. The first 6 months? Brutal. I took anything, basic labor, digging trenches in 110-degree heat, hauling materials, cleaning sites until my fingers bled. But every evening, no matter how exhausted, I studied. I devoured every construction trade magazine, every book on project management, every manual on new building techniques. While other guys were drinking beer, I was learning revolutionary energy efficiency approaches, studying successful construction companies, teaching myself CAD software on a used pawn shop laptop. My breakthrough came when I landed a job with Desert Sun Construction. Jake Morrison, the owner, was old school tough, but fair. He noticed. He saw that I could read blueprints better than guys with twice my experience, that I never made the same mistake twice. "Roger," he said one day, "I've been watching you. You've got something most of these guys don't. You think 3 steps ahead." I'd been obsessing over why our electrical subcontractors kept falling behind. I realized they were wasting hours because they had no systematic approach. If we rearrange the sequence, have them start from the top floor, they can use gravity to run the major cables, I explained to Jake. Plus, if we coordinate with HVAC, both crews can share access equipment instead of renting separate scaffolding. Jake implemented it. The project finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The electrical subcontractor was so impressed, they started requesting me specifically. Word spread. This young guy from back east had ideas that saved time and money. That's when I started offering consulting services on the side. Nothing fancy, just practical solutions. Walk through a job site, identify inefficiencies, propose streamlined approaches. My first client was a restaurant renovation, months behind, thousands over budget. The problem? Coordination. Plumbers finishing, then electricians damaging new pipes. Painters getting delayed, then flooring guys tracking primer everywhere. I spent 3 days creating a detailed timeline, synchronizing every trade based on logical dependencies. The project finished on time, $30,000 under budget. The owner recommended me to 5 other developers. Within 6 months, I had more consulting requests than I could handle. Then I met Jim Caldwell. I was reviewing blueprints at a coffee shop when an older gentleman at the next table leaned over. "Excuse me, son, but I couldn't help noticing those plans. Are you working on the Hampton project?" Jim was 72, silver-haired, with the kind of confident bearing that only comes from decades of success. He'd built Caldwell Development into one of the largest construction companies in the Southwest, sold it, and now consulted. "I've been in this business for 50 years, he said, and I've never seen someone your age read structural drawings with that level of comprehension." We talked for 3 hours. Jim started with nothing, just like me. He built an empire by understanding that construction was about managing relationships, resources, and risk. He'd seen the industry transform, and he recognized the next big shift. "The companies that will dominate the next 20 years, he told me, are the ones that combine old-school craftsmanship with new technology and business innovation. Most executives are either too set in their ways or too inexperienced. But you might be young enough to adapt and experienced enough to understand what really matters." Jim became my informal mentor. He taught me corporate finance, strategic acquisitions, long-term business planning. He introduced me to his network. Most importantly, he helped me understand my real competitive advantage, seeing inefficiencies and devising systematic solutions. "Roger," he said one evening, "you have a gift for operational analysis. Most people focus on individual projects. You naturally think in terms of systems and processes. That's what transforms good contractors into industry leaders." Under Jim's guidance, I incorporated my consulting business, hired 3 young engineers who shared my vision. We developed proprietary software for project management, integrating scheduling, resource allocation, and cost tracking in ways existing systems couldn't match. We called the company Apex Development Group, a name reflecting our commitment to the highest standards. I chose it carefully, wanting excellence, without revealing my personal history. By my 4th year in Phoenix, Apex was managing multi-million-dollar projects. We specialized in complex commercial developments others found too challenging. Our reputation for finishing ahead. of schedule, under budget, attracted clients from across the Southwest. But I never forgot Fletcher Construction. I subscribed to industry publications from back home, tracked their projects, stayed in touch with suppliers and subcontractors. I was building detailed intelligence, their operations, their financial health, their competitive position. What I discovered was both satisfying and deeply concerning. Sarah had brought fresh ideas, mostly cosmetic changes that looked good in marketing materials but ignored fundamental operational issues. New logo, updated website. She charmed potential clients at networking events. But the actual construction work? Suffering. Project timelines were unreliable. Cost overruns were common. Their reputation among subcontractors was tanking. Frank, in a desperate attempt to compensate, was bidding on larger projects, which only magnified their problems. Then I learned through my contacts that Fletcher Construction had won a major government contract, a new federal courthouse, $12 million, their largest undertaking ever. Trade publications praised Sarah's vision, but I recognized the project's specifications immediately. They were almost identical to a proposal I'd written during my senior year of college, a theoretical case study for managing large-scale government construction. I'd spent months on it, left a copy in my childhood bedroom. Sarah hadn't developed new capabilities. She'd just repackaged my old ideas, presenting them as her own. The irony was perfect, but it also revealed a troubling truth. If Fletcher Construction was winning contracts based on strategies they didn't truly understand, they were heading for disaster. And when that disaster arrived, it wouldn't just threaten Frank and Sarah, but the dozens of workers who depended on the company. I had a choice: continue building my own success, let them face the consequences, or intervene. Jim helped me think it through. The question isn't whether you should help them, he said. The question is how to structure your involvement so you can save the valuable parts of what your grandfather built, while ensuring those responsible learn their lessons. That's when I started planning for acquisition, not just simple revenge. If Fletcher Construction was going to fail, I wanted to be in position to preserve its assets, protect its workers, and continue Grandpa Joe's legacy. But first, I had to become successful enough to acquire them. Apex had to expand from a regional consulting firm into a multi-state construction and development company, with the resources for major acquisitions. The work began immediately. Within 18 months, I'd opened offices in 3 more states, hired experienced managers from established companies, and systematically built an empire that made Frank Fletcher's operation look small by comparison. Every night, reviewing projections and expansion plans, I thought about that barbecue, when Frank declared I wasn't worthy. He was right about one thing. I wasn't going to be the kind of Fletcher he wanted. I was going to be something much, much more impressive. 5 years after leaving Phoenix, and everything I'd built there, I stood in the corner office of my new headquarters in Dallas, watching the sunset paint the skyline gold and red. Apex Development Group had become one of the fastest-growing construction companies in the Southwest. But I knew we were ready for the next phase. Transitioning from a regional player to a national contender required a new approach. Instead of bidding on projects one by one, I started acquiring smaller construction companies, giving us immediate market presence. My strategy was surgical, methodical. Identify struggling family-owned businesses, succession issues, cash flow problems. Approach them through intermediaries. The owners usually assumed they were selling to a corporate investment firm, not a young man with a personal vendetta against his own family. My first acquisition was Mountain View Construction in Colorado, specializing in high-altitude projects but lacking capital. Carl Brennan, the owner, was 68, ready to retire. His son chose software engineering. I've been doing this for 43 years, Carl told me. Started with my dad, took over when he had his heart attack. But I can't compete with these big national firms anymore. Margins are too thin, paperwork too much. I structured the deal for Carl to stay as a consultant. Within 6 months, they were bidding on projects 3 times larger. Carl's crews loved the improved equipment and benefits. His clients appreciated enhanced capabilities without losing personal relationships. The model worked. I replicated it across 8 states. Each acquisition brought local knowledge, client relationships, experienced workers. Each deal taught me how to preserve the valuable parts of family businesses while eliminating inefficiencies. Then Amanda Richardson walked into my life. She was the architect on a mixed-use project in Austin. Her innovative approach to sustainable design immediately caught my attention. Most architects focused on aesthetics or functionality. Amanda integrated environmental performance with cost-effectiveness, actually improving both. Our first conversation was scheduled for 30 minutes. It lasted 4 hours. Most construction companies see sustainability as an expensive add-on, she explained, spreading blueprints across the conference table. But if you design systems integration correctly from the beginning, green building techniques reduce total project costs and create long-term operational savings. She was right, and she had the financial analysis to prove it. She also understood that projects succeed or fail based on how well specialists coordinate. Amanda challenged me intellectually in ways I'd never experienced. She had degrees in architecture and environmental engineering from Rice, an MBA from Wharton. But unlike many highly educated professionals, she understood the practical realities of construction because she'd spent summers working for her uncle's contracting business. "You're different from other construction executives," she told me over dinner after our first project. "Most of them see buildings as products to be manufactured as cheaply as possible. You seem to understand that every building becomes part of a community's long-term infrastructure." Our relationship developed gradually, professional respect deepening into personal connection. She appreciated my systematic approach. I was fascinated by her ability to visualize complex spaces and translate abstract designs into practical specifications. When I finally told her my background, my family history, she listened without judgment or surprise. "So you're building this empire partly to prove something to your father," she said, matter-of-factly. "That's not unusual. Most successful entrepreneurs are driven by vision and personal motivation. The question is whether your success will ultimately be about revenge or about creating something meaningful." Amanda understood ambition because she had plenty of her own. We became partners in business and life, pushing each other to think bigger, aim higher. Together, we developed a revolutionary approach, integrating design, engineering, and building from the earliest planning stages. Collaborative teams, optimizing every aspect of development. Projects finished faster because problems were solved during design, not construction. Costs were lower. Buildings performed better. Word spread. We were asked to speak at conferences, consult on challenging projects, partner with other companies. But I never lost focus on my long-term objective. Every success brought me closer to having the resources and reputation necessary to deal with Fletcher Construction when their inevitable crisis arrived. Which is why I'd hired Marcus Webb. Marcus was a private investigator specializing in corporate intelligence, discreet, thorough. His monthly reports kept me updated on Fletcher Construction's financial health, project status, and internal dynamics. The news was increasingly troubling. Sarah's management style was creating serious problems Frank either couldn't see or refused to acknowledge. Expensive marketing, office renovations, while cutting costs on essentials like equipment maintenance and worker training. More concerning, signs of a gambling problem. Marcus documented casino trips, increasing credit card debt, unexplained cash withdrawals from company accounts. Addiction, potentially using company resources. The federal courthouse project, the one that had initially saved Fletcher Construction, was becoming a disaster. Quality control issues, costly delays, subcontractors complaining about late payments. Government inspectors raising questions about substandard materials. Based on what I'm seeing, Marcus reported, Fletcher Construction is heading for a serious crisis within 12 to 18 months. The government contract is barely keeping them solvent. If they lose that revenue stream or face penalties, they'll be looking at bankruptcy within 60 days. The information confirmed my suspicions. Sarah's confidence and charisma had masked fundamental inexperience. She'd won the contract by promising things the company couldn't deliver, and now they were trapped in a cycle of corner-cutting and cost overruns. Frank was trying to manage it by taking on more debt, micromanaging, but his interference only made things worse. Experienced foremen, the ones Grandpa Joe had worked with, were retiring or leaving, taking decades of institutional knowledge with them. But the most disturbing revelation came in Marcus's 8th monthly report. Sarah's gambling had escalated to embezzlement. Falsifying invoices, skimming from employee pension funds, using company credit lines for casino trips. The amounts are getting larger and more frequent, Marcus explained. She's stolen approximately $270,000 over the past 18 months, and the pattern is accelerating. She's also borrowed money from some very dangerous people who don't typically extend payment deadlines for business reasons. I sat in my office that night, staring out at the Dallas skyline, thinking about the cruel irony. Frank chose Sarah because he thought she had the backbone. Instead, she was destroying everything Grandpa Joe built, putting herself, and potentially Frank, in physical danger. Amanda found me there at midnight, still reviewing Marcus's reports. "You're going to help them, aren't you?" she said, settling into the chair. "I should let them face the consequences," I replied. Frank made it clear I wasn't family. Sarah chose to accept everything that should have been partly mine. They created this through arrogance and poor judgment. "But you're not going to let them destroy what your grandfather built," Amanda said. It wasn't a question. She was right, of course. Whatever Frank and Sarah had done, Fletcher Construction represented 3 generations of honest work, of community contribution. 63 people worked there, with no part in our family drama. Somewhere in that failing organization were the values Grandpa Joe had instilled in me, that every foundation had to be perfect. "If I'm going to intervene," I said, "it has to be on my terms. I won't just bail them out so they can make the same mistakes. There has to be accountability and real change." Amanda smiled. "So, what's your plan?" I pulled out a legal pad, sketching the framework for what would become the most complex and personally satisfying business deal of my career. If Fletcher Construction was to be saved, it would be because they accepted help from the son Frank had declared unworthy. And that help would come with conditions, forcing everyone to confront the true cost of their choices. The first warning hit on a Tuesday morning. Marcus called before 7 a.m., urgency raw in his voice. "Roger, we need to meet today. The situation with Fletcher Construction just got dramatically worse. There are safety concerns now, beyond business problems." We met at a coffee shop, far from my office. Marcus looked sleepless, the thick folder he carried filled with photos and documents outlining a company in complete freefall. The government inspectors found serious structural problems with the courthouse project, he began, spreading photos across our small table. "Sarah has been authorizing substandard materials to reduce costs and cover the money she's stolen. We're not talking cosmetic issues. We're talking support beams that don't meet load-bearing specs, electrical systems violating basic safety codes." The photos made me physically sick. Foundations with visible cracks, wrong-gauge steel, electrical panels installed without proper grounding. This wasn't just bad work. It was negligence that could cause a building to collapse or catch fire. "The Federal Contracting Office has suspended all payments," Marcus continued. "They're also talking about prosecuting for fraud if they determine the materials were used intentionally." But the legal problems were just the beginning. The next photos Marcus showed revealed the human cost of Sarah's addiction. She owes $420,000 to a loan shark operation run by Vincent Torino, Marcus explained. "These aren't casino debts anymore. She borrowed directly from organized crime figures who don't negotiate or accept excuses." Surveillance photos showed Sarah meeting men in expensive suits, her body language revealing desperation. In one, she was crying. In another, handing over company documents, collateral. Torino's people have made it clear. If Sarah can't pay within 30 days, they'll collect from her family instead, Marcus said, his voice grim. "They've already started surveillance on Frank's house and your mother's gravesite. A message. They know how to hurt him emotionally, as well as physically." The mention of my mother's grave. A cold, white-hot rage flared in me, unlike anything I'd felt since that barbecue. Threatening to desecrate Mom's memory? That crossed lines even criminals should respect. "Where is Sarah now?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "She disappeared 4 days ago. Cleaned out her accounts, grabbed her passport, vanished," Marcus replied. "Frank thinks she's visiting college friends, but her credit cards show charges from Atlantic City casino hotels. She's probably trying to gamble her way out, just digging the hole deeper." Marcus pulled out financial documents. Sarah had forged Frank's signature on loans, mortgaged the family home without his knowledge, even borrowed against Mom's life insurance. Total debt? Over $1.2 million. Far more than Fletcher Construction could ever pay. "Frank doesn't know about most of this yet," Marcus explained. "Sarah's been intercepting mail, handling all the financial communications. He thinks the company is struggling, but viable. He has no idea he's personally liable for loans he never approved. The cruelest irony was Frank. He was working harder than he had in years, trying to solve operational problems he thought were just from the project's complexity. 18-hour days, pushing his aging body. The stress is killing him, Marcus said quietly. His foreman, Eddie Martinez, called me. Frank's lost 30 pounds in 2 months. Not sleeping. He has a tremor that gets worse when he's frustrated. I stared at a surveillance photo of Frank, alone in the half-finished courthouse, looking older, more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Despite everything, the years of anger, seeing him like this stirred emotions I thought I'd buried forever. There's something else, Marcus added, his voice barely a whisper. Torino's people have been asking questions about you. My blood ran cold. What kind of questions? They know Frank has a son who left town years ago, became successful in construction. They're trying to figure out if you might be worth approaching as an alternative source of payment. The implications slammed into me. Not only were they threatening Frank, but now they were potentially targeting Amanda and Apex. I'd legally changed my last name to Williams 3 years earlier, partly to distance myself from the drama, partly to avoid exactly this. But it wouldn't protect me indefinitely if organized crime started investigating seriously. What's your recommendation? I asked, though my own plan was already forming. You need to decide quickly, Marcus said. Help Frank, or cut all ties and disappear. If you intervene, it has to be soon. Torino's deadline is in 3 weeks. If you stay out of it, make sure they can't trace you back to Apex. That evening, Amanda and I sat in our home office, reviewing everything Marcus found. She'd been quiet throughout my explanation, but I could see her analytical mind working. This isn't really about business anymore, she said finally. This is about whether you can live with yourself if you let your father get hurt by problems your sister created. She was right, but it was complicated. If I bail them out, I said, I'm not just paying Sarah's gambling debts. I'm enabling her addiction, teaching her there are no real consequences for stealing and lying. That doesn't help anyone long-term. But if you don't intervene, Amanda countered, your father could be seriously injured by people who don't care about teaching lessons or personal growth. And 63 innocent workers will lose their jobs. We spent hours researching Vincent Torino. The news wasn't good. Extortion, assault, but never successfully prosecuted. Witnesses disappeared. His loan shark operation was vicious. Sarah fits their perfect victim profile, Amanda observed. Gambling addiction, access to company funds, family members with potential resources, and enough social status that she'll go to extreme lengths to avoid public exposure. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I couldn't let Frank get hurt by criminals. But I also couldn't simply pay Sarah's debts. I was going to force a confrontation that would resolve all of these issues permanently. First, a meeting with Frank, ostensibly business, but really to assess how much he knew. Second, a comprehensive plan to neutralize the criminal threat. Third, preserve Fletcher Construction, hold everyone accountable. It's going to be the most complex negotiation of my career, I told Amanda, with stakes far beyond money. But if I pull it off, I might save my father's life and prove that the son he rejected was worthy of the Fletcher name after all. The irony. Frank always said construction needed quick decisions, the ability to command respect. Now, we'd see if the son he dismissed as too soft had developed exactly those qualities. Back at Romano's Steakhouse, it hadn't changed much in 18 years. Dark wood, red leather, the familiar smell of grilled meat. Frank's favorite. I arrived early, chose a corner table with clear sightlines. Marcus confirmed Torino's men were still watching Frank. I couldn't be surprised. Frank walked in at 6 p.m. sharp, looking around nervously as the hostess led him to my table. The years hadn't been kind. His thick brown hair, now completely gray, deep lines around his eyes. His once powerful frame, diminished, almost fragile. But it was the defeat in his posture that struck me most. The confident swagger of Frank Fletcher? Gone. Replaced by the careful movements of a man utterly beaten down. He slid into the booth across from me, hands shaking as he reached for the water. Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Williams, he rasped, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. I know this is unusual, reaching out through intermediaries, but I'm in a situation where I need to explore every possible option. The irony of him not recognizing me, after almost 2 decades. It was both painful and perfectly exquisite. I looked just like he had at my age, But the expensive suit, the confident bearing, it made me unrecognizable as the young man he'd dismissed. I understand your company is facing some financial difficulties, I said, keeping my voice neutral, professional. My associates mentioned you're looking to sell assets quickly. His face crumpled slightly. Mr. Williams, I've been in construction for 37 years. I took over Fletcher Construction from my father-in-law, spent decades building it. But I made some mistakes. Leadership decisions. Now I'm facing consequences that could destroy everything. The admission was more honest than I'd expected. Frank had always been too proud to admit weakness. Seeing him acknowledge failure told me how desperate he truly was. What kind of mistakes? I asked, though I knew. Frank closed his eyes. I have 2 children, he began, his voice barely a whisper. 18 years ago, I chose to put my daughter in charge instead of my son. I thought she had better leadership instincts, more charisma. I thought my son was too analytical, too cautious for this business. He paused, staring at his hands. I was wrong about everything. My son understood this business better than I gave him credit for. He had ideas that could have modernized us, made us competitive. But I was too proud, too set in my ways to listen. The pain in his voice was genuine. Despite years of resentment, I felt an unexpected stab of sympathy. What happened to your son? I asked. I drove him away, Frank said simply. I humiliated him, told him he wasn't worthy, made it clear he had no future with us. I haven't spoken to him since. He pulled out a worn newspaper clipping. 3 months ago, I read about a young man named Roger Williams, winning the National Construction Association's Businessman of the Year award. The article said he started with nothing, built a multi-state empire, specializing in innovative project management. The ideas, they were almost identical to suggestions my son had made years earlier. And when I saw the photograph, even with the different name, I recognized something familiar. He looked up at me, eyes filled with hope and desperate uncertainty. Mr. Williams, I think the successful businessman I'm meeting with tonight might be my son, Roger, who I wronged so terribly 18 years ago. The moment stretched. 18 years of pain, anger, regret, hanging in the air. I could have continued the deception, but instead, I leaned forward. Quietly, I said, "Hello, Dad." Frank's face went white, then red. Then it crumpled completely, as 18 years of suppressed emotion crashed over him like a tsunami. He began to cry. Not careful tears, but the raw, ugly sobbing of someone whose world just shifted on its axis. "Oh God, Roger," he choked out between sobs. "Oh God, what have I done?" I waited, fighting my own emotions. "I'm sorry," he finally managed. "I'm so sorry for everything. For not listening. For choosing Sarah. For trying to sabotage your career. I was wrong. I've regretted it every day." Before I could respond, his phone rang. Sarah's name. But the voice on the other end was male. "Mr. Fletcher, this is Vincent Torino. I think it's time we had a conversation about your daughter's debt." Frank's face went pale. I could hear Torino's voice, clear as day. $420,000 plus interest. She's disappeared rather than honor her commitments. I need payment arrangements within 72 hours. I understand you have a construction company, some real estate assets. We can work out a plan, but I'll need $100,000 by Friday. A substantial down payment. Frank tried to speak, but Torino cut him off. "Mr. Fletcher, this isn't a negotiation. Your daughter borrowed from me, and she used you as collateral. If you don't cooperate, I'll be forced to pursue collection through other means." The threat was unmistakable. Frank looked at me, eyes wide with terror. "I understand," he whispered into the phone. "I'll figure something out." "I hope so, for your sake," Torino replied. "I'll be in touch." Frank hung up, stunned. "Roger," he said, "you need to leave. Right now? These are dangerous people. I can't let you get involved." That's when I noticed the black SUV in the parking lot, through the restaurant window. 2 men in suits, watching our table. "Dad," I said calmly, "I think it might be too late for that." The next morning, I sat in the conference room of my corporate security firm. Vincent Torino's photograph filled the wall-mounted screen. My head of security, David Chun, briefed me. "Torino operates a sophisticated loan shark business, targeting people with gambling addictions who have access to significant assets," David explained. "He's been under federal investigation for 2 years, but witnesses keep disappearing." He clicked to the next slide, financial records, surveillance photos. Sarah Fletcher fits his perfect victim profile. Gambling addiction, access to company funds, family members with substantial resources. He deliberately cultivated her addiction, providing initial loans at reasonable terms, escalating pressure once she was in too deep. I studied the timeline. Sarah's gambling started innocently, but Torino's organization identified her, encouraged her, offered easy credit, VIP treatment. The $420,000 debt is legitimate, David continued. But Torino structured the loans specifically to ensure Sarah couldn't pay them back normally. His goal was always leverage over Fletcher Construction and the family's assets. Amanda, beside me, reviewed legal documents. The federal investigators will be very interested in Sarah's testimony, she observed. If we can guarantee her safety and cooperation, we can help them build a solid case. But first, I needed to find Sarah, convince her to face the mess. Marcus had tracked her to Atlantic City, gambling away what little remained. My security team had her under discreet surveillance. I flew to New Jersey that evening, Amanda and David with me. The Borgata Casino Hotel at 2 a.m. was exactly what I expected. Desperate people, cigarette smoke, the heavy air of belief that the next hand would solve everything. Sarah was at a blackjack table, high-limit section. Empty drinks, betting chips worth more than most people made in a month. She'd lost weight, disheveled, clearly gambling for days. I approached, took the empty seat beside her. Quietly, "Hello, Sarah." She looked up, eyes unfocused. It took seconds for recognition. "Roger," she whispered, like I was a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to help you get out of the hole you've dug," I said calmly. "But first, you need to step away from the table." Her hands shook, reaching for chips, but I gently stopped her. "Leave them. You're done gambling." For a moment, I thought she'd argue. Instead, she started crying, raw sobbing. "I can't stop," she whispered. "I know I'm destroying everything, but I can't stop. Every time I try to quit, I tell myself, just one more hand." I helped her up, guided her to Amanda and David. "Sarah," I said gently, "Torino's people have threatened Dad. They've been watching his house, following him to work. They mentioned Mom's gravesite. They know how to hurt him." Her face went white. "I never meant for Dad to get involved. Torino said the loans were just between us." "That was never true," David interjected. "Torino targets people whose families have assets. You were always just the entry point to leverage Fletcher Construction." I laid out the plan. "The federal investigators need your testimony to build a case against Torino's organization. If you cooperate fully, help them understand how they exploited your addiction, they can protect you from retaliation while shutting them down." Sarah was skeptical. "What about the money I stole? I forged Dad's signature, embezzled from pensions, used company credit cards. Even if the FBI protects me, I'm still looking at federal fraud charges." Amanda leaned forward, calm. "The prosecution will be more interested in Torino's organization than in someone clearly exploited. If you provide complete cooperation and agree to a comprehensive addiction treatment program, we can negotiate a plea agreement focused on restitution, not jail time." But Sarah still didn't grasp the full scope. "How can I make restitution? I stole over $400,000, plus what I owe Torino. I could never pay that back." That's when I revealed the final piece. "Sarah, I'm going to buy Fletcher Construction from Dad and restructure it as a subsidiary of my company. You're going to work there, under proper supervision, helping to rebuild what you damaged. Every penny of your salary above basic living expenses will go toward restitution until the debt is fully paid." She stared at me in disbelief. "You'd actually help me? After everything I did? After I took everything that should have been partly yours?" "I'm not doing this for you," I said honestly. "I'm doing it for Dad, for the 63 people who work for Fletcher Construction, and for Grandpa Joe's legacy. But if you're willing to take responsibility and commit to real change, then yes, I'll help you rebuild your life." The conversation with the federal investigators the next morning was exactly as Amanda predicted. Agent Patricia Morrison had been tracking Torino for 2 years. Sarah's testimony was the insider information they needed. "Mr. Torino's operations specifically target people with gambling addictions who have access to business or family assets," Agent Morrison explained. "They use sophisticated psychological manipulation to escalate the addiction, ensuring the victim becomes financially dependent." Sarah's detailed account gave the FBI everything they needed. "In exchange for your complete cooperation," Agent Morrison concluded, We're prepared to recommend a plea agreement focused on supervised restitution, not incarceration. 3 days later, I sat with Frank. The same conference room where I'd learned about Torino's threats. But the atmosphere was completely different. I still can't believe it, Frank said, shaking his head as he reviewed the acquisition documents. My son, who I treated so terribly, is saving my company and protecting our family from criminals. Dad, I said, I need you to understand. This isn't charity. Fletcher Construction will become a subsidiary of Apex Development Group, operating according to my standards. Modern project management, proper financial controls, a commitment to quality that puts long-term reputation ahead of short-term profits. Frank nodded eagerly. Roger, I'll do whatever you think is best. You've proven you understand this business better than I ever did. But I wasn't finished. You're going to stay on as a regional manager, but you'll be working for me, following my systems. Sarah will also work for the company, in a supervised position focused on community outreach and addiction recovery programs. Every major decision, projects, finances, strategic direction, will require my approval. Frank was quiet for a long moment, processing that his son was now his boss. His daughter, essentially starting over. I deserve that, he said finally. We both deserve that. But Roger, I need you to know how proud I am of what you've built. Not just the business success, but the man you've become. You could have let us face the consequences. Instead, you found a way to save what was valuable while holding us accountable. 6 months later, I stood in the construction trailer overlooking the renovated federal courthouse project. Frank and Sarah, working together, coordinating final inspections. Torino's investigation? Even more successful than the FBI hoped. Torino's testimony, plus other victims coming forward, resulted in federal convictions for racketeering, extortion, fraud. 15 years in federal prison. His operation dismantled. Fletcher Construction was completely restructured, operating to Apex standards. The courthouse project finished on time, under budget, exceeding all government specs. Their reputation wasn't just restored, it was enhanced. Sarah? She embraced her role in the company's community outreach program with an intensity that surprised everyone. Residential addiction treatment. Now working with other families affected by gambling addiction, using her experience to help people recognize warning signs. I lost everything because I thought I could gamble my way out of problems instead of facing them honestly, she said at a presentation. My brother saved our family by showing me that real solutions require hard work, accountability, and the courage to ask for help. Frank adapted with remarkable grace. No resentment. He seemed genuinely grateful for the structure and oversight that had eliminated the stress that was killing him. Working for you is like getting a masterclass, he told me one evening. I'm learning things at 68 I should have figured out decades ago. But the most meaningful change was in our personal relationship. The anger and resentment that had poisoned our family for 18 years was finally healing, replaced by mutual respect, based on honest acknowledgement of past mistakes. Amanda and I decided to relocate back home, partly for Fletcher Construction, but mostly because running away hadn't solved anything. You know what's interesting about this whole situation? Amanda observed. You achieved everything you set out to prove to your father, but the real satisfaction came from choosing forgiveness over revenge. She was absolutely right. All the business success in the world hadn't provided the emotional closure I found in those moments. Frank breaking down, Sarah committing to rebuild, our family finally dealing honestly with the pain. The courthouse wasn't just a construction success. It became a symbol of what's possible when people take responsibility and work together to build something meaningful. The morning sun cast long shadows across the construction site. 3 generations of Fletcher craftsmanship, finally united with modern innovation and ethical business practices. I stood beside Frank and Amanda at the groundbreaking for our newest project, a housing development for military veterans transitioning to civilian life. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the crowd. This project represents everything we believe about building communities, not just buildings. Each home, energy efficient, accessible, shared community spaces. The applause was warm. But what moved me most was Frank's face. The pride in his eyes wasn't superficial. It was the deep contentment of someone who'd learned to find meaning in work that served others. Sarah stepped forward. As someone who nearly destroyed my family through addiction and poor choices, she said, her voice steady and confident. I understand how easy it is to lose your way. This housing development isn't just about homes. It's about creating a supportive community where veterans can build new foundations for their lives, just like I've rebuilt mine. The past year had transformed her. Helping others was more satisfying than any casino jackpot. After the ceremony, Frank and I walked through the site. You know what your grandfather would have said about this project? Frank asked, running his hand along a concrete form. What's that, Dad? He always told me the most important thing about any foundation is that it has to support not just the building you're planning today, but whatever needs to be built on it in the future. You never know what challenges or opportunities are coming, so you build it strong enough to handle anything. Frank paused, looking over the site. I think that's what you've done with our family, Roger. You didn't just solve the immediate crisis. You built something strong enough to handle whatever comes next. He was right. It had taken years to understand Grandpa Joe's deeper lesson. Apex's success was never really about proving Frank wrong. The real achievement was building systems and relationships strong enough to survive mistakes, conflicts, unexpected challenges. Amanda joined us. I've been thinking about what we want to do next, she said, spreading blueprints. Hundreds of communities need this integrated approach. Her vision, a model for ethical construction practices, a network of independent but coordinated firms. It made perfect sense. The industry was full of family businesses struggling with succession, finance, modernization. Instead of acquiring them or letting them fail, we could share best practices, maintain local character. That evening, at a barbecue, I realized the most meaningful success wasn't measured in dollars. Sarah approached me. Roger, she said quietly, I know I've thanked you, but I don't think you really understand what you've given me. Not just the second chance. You showed me it's possible to face the worst consequences and still build something meaningful. I thought my life was over. Working on these projects has taught me every ending can also be a beginning. Frank overheard. Your brother taught me something similar, he said. Roger, I spent 18 years regretting that decision at the barbecue. I thought the mistake was permanent. But what you've shown me is that mistakes don't have to be permanent if you're willing to take responsibility and work to make things right. As the evening wound down, I thought about the journey. 18 years ago, Frank said I wasn't worthy. He was partially right. The young man who left, full of bruised pride, wouldn't have handled this. But the experiences of building Apex, learning from Jim, navigating corporate acquisitions and criminal threats, that forged the strength this business actually required. Not superficial toughness, but resilience. 3 months later, I stood in that same courthouse, this time for the ribbon cutting. Federal Judge Patricia Williams spoke of craftsmanship and integrity. The irony wasn't lost on us. The project that almost destroyed us had become the foundation for everything we'd built since. Driving home, Amanda reflected, you achieved everything you set out to prove. But the real satisfaction came from learning that success means creating something larger than yourself. She was right. The man who returned was more interested in building foundations strong enough for the future. 6 months later, watching Frank and Sarah work on a community center for addiction counseling, I realized we'd achieved something more valuable than business success. We'd learned that every foundation, building, family, community, requires honesty about mistakes, commitment to doing better, and patient, careful work. The Fletcher name now represented redemption, forgiveness, growth. Grandpa Joe would be proud. Not just a company, but a foundation strong enough for whatever needed to be built next.